Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about attributes limiting skills, or more specifically, what a commenter asked a question about contradictions between attributes and skills. So let me give the question first, and then I'll dive into my response. The question was from Deja Vu 6196, who asked, "Hi Tim, what are your thoughts on contradictions between attributes and skills? How can a player with a 1 intelligence reach 100 in the science skill? Should they be allowed to, or should the attribute cap the max skill they can reach? Taking a specific example from Fallout New Vegas, the same 1 character who has a dumb dialogue can somehow reach speech 100 and logically talk Legate Linnaeus into retreating, which also seems contradictory." It's a good question. Also, Deja Vu is a master member as of just a few hours ago. So I knocked this up in the queue, and even though it's July 4th, which you can see from my shirt, literally it's the morning, it's 6:30 a.m. on July 4th. I'm going to film this, put it in the queue, have it pop out on Monday, so rock on Deja Vu. First off, when I read your question, I immediately stopped at that word contradiction. The contradiction between attributes and skills. And I know what you meant. You were saying, hey, how can someone who has a low attribute become very good in a skill that's dependent on that attribute? Like, how could I become good at bows if my dexterity is bad? Or how could I become, good at, spotting traps if I'm nearsighted, or have a low perception? I don't see this as a contradiction, though. And one of the things I've always said is, I think when you have a low attribute, if you make a character with a low attribute, and then they become really good, that's awesome. Because saying otherwise is kind of saying you have to be amazing now to become amazing later, which is something I fundamentally disagree with. Go watch my video where I talk about learning from failure. Messing up is the best way to get better at something. When you're good at something, it doesn't teach you why you're good at it or how you're good at it, but you mess up a few times, you're like, oh, now I know what not to do. Now I'm getting better. So I basically believe wholeheartedly in real life, as well as in all my RPGs, that you don't start off amazing. You become amazing. That's the whole point. So I view this entire construct of attributes and skills as the player has to overcome obstacles. In fact, that's kind of the whole point of every RPG I've made. That the player is faced with obstacles that they have to overcome, and they do. It's the whole struggling against all odds. It's the player protagonist comes out of nowhere and becomes the hero, and they weren't, a walking god on the planet when they started, but they became one. Some of these struggles are external. The game throws them at you externally. There are villains for you to fight. There are monsters that come at you. There are traps and dungeons that will try to kill you, and you're supposed to figure your way past all of these obstacles. Whether you do it with fighting, or whether you do it with thinking, or whether you do it with sneaking, or whether you do it with talking, you're supposed to get by these obstacles somehow with the character you made. But we always let the character get better, and that's kind of the point. Maybe that trap kills you, and then you get really good at disarming traps or detecting traps. Maybe, your character is weak on magic, and then you can find gear that helps you defend against that. But then there's also personal struggles, which in some cases can be a lot more interesting than the external ones. Maybe your character has physical limitations, mental limitations, emotional limitations, and these are things you have to overcome when you play the game. And that's, to me, kind of a lot more interesting than some of the external ones. You're making a character who, for some reason, is seen as lesser and has to overcome that. And when you're talking specifically about a low intelligence character reaching maximum in science or speech, I'm like, yes, that's exactly the kind of thing I would love to have in my games. I think I had in my games. So I'm overwhelmingly saying yes, there's no contradiction there. I like that. Plus, this is a great way to have a different narrative path. In my games in Fallout and Outer Worlds and several of the games, we had different dialogue lines for dumb characters. You take the character with the lowest possible intelligence or close to it, and you get completely different lines in dialogue. What a great way to have a dumb character use speech to win a dialogue encounter in an entirely different way. It's fun. It reminds you that you made a character who was stupid, but has somehow become very, very good at talking to people. It makes it different. It gives replayability, which is all of these things are stuff I like. Plus, and I've worked with the narrative designers that I've said this to them directly. I'm like, I view this as a challenge. Are you narratively up to this challenge? Can you write a line that a dumb person would say that would convince a smart villain, oops, I think you might be right? You've all seen shows where that's happened, where it's the not the brightest person in the room goes, why aren't we just doing this? Or, hey, what about this thing we found? Or just, they say something and they don't know they're saying something. It's someone else who goes, wait, I hear what you're saying. And then they reframe it as something brilliant. I love that. It's funny. It's fun. It lets the character have their own spin on things. What is wrong with that? That just hits every lever I like to have in my RPGs. So I understand, though, the original question with it being, hey, shouldn't this attribute cap a skill? Shouldn't you not let a really low perception person get a high spot traps? Shouldn't you prevent a dumb character from getting really good at speech or really good at science? And I'm like, I wouldn't. My answer there is no, I wouldn't do that. But you be you. If you want to design an RPG that way, you go right ahead. It even ticks the pillar of, here's a player choice that leads to a player consequence, and you tell them that up front. You're like, hey, these attributes factor into these skills, and these skills will be capped at a maximum amount. I think that's a perfectly fine way of designing an RPG. The one thing I think you should think about is once you put that in there, it requires a player to know at the start of the game whether they eventually will want a skill. Which many of them, especially on their first playthrough, and for some players, you have to realize the first playthrough of your game is the only playthrough of your game. They won't play it twice. You're requiring them to decide how they want their character to end up, how they want their character to be playing at end game, which could be 20, 40, 100 hours away, right now, at the beginning of the game. So, my only recommendation is if you want to make a game where the attributes cap the skills to a certain maximum, you might want to think about adding a perk or maybe a rare item that removes that cap. The reason I like the perk one is it means you have to buy a perk to get rid of that limitation, and that could have been another perk you bought. So it's costing you a perk slot you can think of. Same thing with the item. If I were to design such an item, that's all it would do. Like maybe there's a cap you can put on. It doesn't make you smarter, but it removes limitations so a dumb character can raise their intelligence-based skills. But that's all that item does. So now you're not wearing that helmet of, heat vision, or you're not wearing that, chapeau of invisibility. You're basically using up that armor slot to eliminate a level cap. That's how I would go if I were to make a game like that. Anyway, to sum up, my TLDW, which is probably too late because you've W'd, is I wouldn't design a game with that cap. And if I did, I would probably throw in ways of eliminating the cap just to let the player overcome their obstacles. Because that's I think, one of the fundamental things of an RPG is making a weak character who overcomes their own personal obstacles and then external obstacles become the hero of the game. Anyway, I hope that answered your question, Deja Vu 6196, and welcome to being a member on the channel.